ahead and get started for today for our session on writing accountability. Hello to my people in the room. It's good to see you. Hello to my people online. It's good to see you as well in the virtual space. Excited to talk to you all today and do this session on writing accountability. If you haven't met me before, my name is Jesse Singleton. I'm the Assistant Director for Student Support with the Graduate School. And I'll be doing your presentation today. I also have one of my staff members in the room helping us out, Elizabeth Biney, who is my graduate assistant, and she'll be helping me keep track of the digital space. And so making sure that if you have any questions in the chat, things like that, make sure I don't miss it. And so if you need anything, please let us know, and we'll do that. Because of the microphone issues and things like that, I will likely stay pretty central to the front of the room today. Even though I typically like to wander during sessions, I will stay up here to make sure everyone can hear me. It'll be a good session for us. This writing accountability workshop is actually a new one that we're doing at the Graduate School, and so I would love any feedback you have on it, on if this is what you were expecting, if you want more content in a certain area, anything like that. We always send out a feedback survey on our sessions, but this is a new one, so I'd love you all to complete that when you get it, and let me know what you think. If it's not good, tell me, I'll fix it. If you liked it, tell me, and I'll keep doing it. But we're talking about writing accountability, which is something that folks have asked about in the past, wanted some tips and strategies on. And so I formulated this over the summer. I piloted it for some liberal arts students, and now I'll be doing it for you all. So to get us started, though, and I'll need some participation both in the chat and the people in the room. I want to do a thought experiment, okay? Think to yourself, what could you do to ensure your own failure when it comes to maintaining productive writing habits? If you want to guarantee that you would fail in maintaining your productivity with writing, what could you do to ensure that? And just shout that out or put it in the chat. Let me know. Check it on the side so I can see it. This is the interactive portion. I see not allowing enough time to process ideas. Good. Not setting specific goals. Yep, absolutely. Waiting until the last minute. Absolutely. Yep. What else? In the room, people, come on. You got a brownie, you got some sugar going through your bloodstream. Give me something.
Procrastination.
I hear procrastination. Yep.
Not having the good skills already.
Right. Not having the actual skills you need to do the writing. Yep.
Always, I would like to write in a perfect way, and it's for sure fast.
Being a perfectionist in your writing. Yeah. And that creates that boundary. Not proofreading. These are all really good ideas of things that we could do that would guarantee our own failure. Now, I'm not going to ask anyone to own up to this, but I want you to think for yourselves. How many of these things that you know will ensure your own fail are you doing anyway? Right? Probably a fair amount. It's our natural human behavior, right? Sometimes we recognize that's a bad habit, it's not good for us, and we do it anyway, right? It's the junk food. We know it's not good for us, but we eat it anyway, right? We know that procrastination isn't going to help us, but we procrastinate anyway. Or we know that being a perfectionist in our writing isn't going to help us be proactive and productive in our writing, but we still fall into those same mental lenses. And today's session is about breaking you out of those negative habits, right? And trying to develop positive ones. That's my goal, right? And sometimes just recognizing, putting a name to what you're doing for yourself that's fitting in your own way is a powerful step in overcoming, right? And so if you name some of these things and you know that's you, we've labeled it. Now, how do we move past it? Not expecting you to be perfect, right? We'll occasionally still engage in some of these behaviors, but how do we move past it? So I got a couple multi-step process I'm going to walk you through that I think will help you develop strong habits, make you more productive writers, increase your overall accountability, which will make you just more satisfied with your writing. And the first step we're going to talk about is getting organized. It's key. It's the first thing you have to do in order to be successful in writing and creating a successful writing habit, right? You have to be organized. If you're conducting research, right? And in some ways, you're probably doing at least, whether it's researching through articles and scholarly journals, or doing your own research yourself with subjects, you're conducting some kind of research for your projects, right? You cannot go right from conducting and collecting all of this research and knowledge directly into the writing process. You have to organize what you're doing. If you jump right in, you'll be at a loss. It will seem too large. It will be hard to organize your ideas. And so you have to have this intermediary step between conducting this research, cataloging this research, and then actually going and writing about it intelligently in an organized way, right? Otherwise, it will always feel chaotic. It will always feel like it's too much. And so we want to start by being organized what we do, right? We have to have a process for that. So in order to get organized, my recommendation is get organized from the first day, right? Now, if you're already in the middle of your research, you might be saying, Jesse, it's too late. It's okay. It's never too late. But as you're starting any process in your research, I encourage you, get organized on the first day. And if you're not there yet, let's start applying these things now. Take the time out of what you're doing to get organized, right? And there's lots of ways that I encourage you to do this. First is sort through your digital sources, right? And organize them in a way that makes sense to you and you can easily find. You're going to have digital sources that you're referencing. You're going to have data sets that you're going to be needing to have set, right? And you also have search terms. And if you think back to when you've done some, trying to find some secondary sources for your research, you may have not been cataloging the search terms you've been using to find that additional secondary source, right? That's a missed opportunity for your organization. So something people often think about, how are you cataloging what search terms you're using on a regular basis that's yielding good quality results, right? So finding organization for that, right? It's also important to create multiple levels of accessibility for your research materials. I mentioned secondary sources. These are the things that you're finding that are going to help support your research, your hypothesis, the argumentation that you're making, right? It's the work of others that support your work. You're going to find a wide volume of that, and you're going to need to be able to cite that efficiently, right? And so my recommendation is you organize that by topic rather than like chapter or area, right? So you may have, like I'm working on chapter 2 of my dissertation, and all of the articles that I'm referencing, I've dumped into chapter 2. Well, remembering exactly where something falls in chapter 2 might be difficult, but referencing specifically that this research relates to, talking with Eloise, one of our people in the room, that they're researching gender in the border community, right? And so if you have a specific folder for a subsection of your research on gender in the border community, these are the articles that support that argumentation, much easier for you to find. And as you're drawing narrative threads between chapters, you can go find the research that supports it, versus having to remember what chapter did I reference that page or that article that I can now bring forward here to draw that through line for myself, right? And so I encourage you to think about that, organize things by topic. And then for your research, think about how you can organize your material so you can get into your data and locate it quickly, right? And for each of you, that's going to be a bit different depending on the research that you're doing. And it has to make sense for your own organizational schemes, right? Me standing up here, Jesse, as the person giving this session, is going to have a very different organizational scheme than you might have, right? If you jump into my OneDrive for the university and start looking through my files, which in some ways are organized, in some ways it's a little bit chaotic, right? I've tried to organize them over time, and usually I hit a critical point where I'm like, okay, I've got a lot of files in one area, I start organizing and make sense from it there, right? If you jumped into my OneDrive, you're jumping into my brain a little bit, and the way I organize it may not be the way you organize it. So finding something may take you a minute, right? But for me, I know where my stuff's at. Because I've organized things in a very specific way to make sure I can find it quickly. The research needs to be the same way. And so how are you creating your file folders in a way that you can quickly find something, right? And we'll talk about why that's important as we get into the more of the writing steps. If you think about it, if you spend a lot of time having to find a specific data set or a quote in your secondary material, it is taking you out of the writing space. And so being efficient at that will increase your productivity, which increases your accountability to your writing. Another suggestion is that you can organize your research based on the argument you're making in each chapter, right? And so if you have this broad topic that you know that in this chapter, I am arguing, if we go to a STEM area, we'll say that, this specific compound you're working on has been shown to have a positive effect on cancer treatment in mice. This is the area I'm talking about that specifically. And so I want that research in that section for that argument because we're doing somewhere else later, right? So organize it by the argument that you're making. And that'll make it much easier to find, right? Versus broad chapter designations in what you're doing. Make sense? All right, so get organized in what you're doing and all the research that you're conducting. You also need to get organized about how you're going to go about writing. And as we go through our session, I'm going to reference Jen Allen, who has done a lot of research in her own right on how graduate students receive mentorship and how they write in the graduate space. Has written a book called The Productive Graduate Writer, and is a great resource on this. So I'm going to use some of her information. I'm also going to give you a QR so you can see her website later and get more on this. But I do derive some of her materials, a lot of really great material we use for that. Jen Allen currently works, I believe, at Cornell as the Associate Dean, previously worked at Columbia and some other institutions. And graduate students is her area of focus for her research, right? And your success. So she's a great area to draw. She has this 4-list strategy I found very interesting that I'll put to you. So you think about how you write, you think about you've organized your research, your secondary sources, you also have to organize your process for how you're going to write. And she has some tips for that in this 4-list strategy. The first one is that she encourages you to write a list for everything you need to do after you stop writing, right? So you sit down, spend 5 minutes and think about what else do I need to do today, right? Errands that you need to run. I got to pick up the dry cleaning, right? If anyone still does dry cleaning. I need to go to the grocery store, right? My kids get out of school at 3:30. If I don't get there, that's going to be a problem because I have to pick the kids from school. Otherwise, CPS will come talk to me, right? I got to make that list. What other tasks you have, projects that you need to complete? What else is going on? Putting those down in a physical list helps them take them out of your mind so you can focus fully on your writing, right? So you put them down saying, I know I have to do that, and I'm setting that aside for now. I'm focusing on my writing. That's the first list. The second list is as you write, do not stop writing in your flow to seek out a reference, an article, or a book, right? If you know there's a citation that you need, note it for yourself in the article, in the thing that you're writing, but don't stop to go find it and spend 10 to 15 minutes getting out of your flow to find a quote, right? If it's directly available to you, you can put it in. If you have to look for it, just make a note for yourself to come back and find it later, right? That way you're always in that flow. You're always moving forward with your writing. Third list is the last 5 to 10 minutes of your writing time. Make a list of whatever is coming next in your writing. What's next in your flow of thoughts, right? You're gonna reach a point where it's like, you're at the graduate writing retreat with us, which is coming up in October, right? And I give you the 30-minute warning, 10-minute warning, we're about to wrap up. You don't want to be stuck in the middle of a paragraph or an idea and then lose that train of thought. So stop that writing section and make a list of what do I need to do? What's in my brain right now? What's my bulleted list so you can pick it up and run with it later, right? That will allow for a faster start the next time you write. And the final list is making a list of what you will not do that gives you back time in your day to do your writing, right? This is a bit about time management, about thinking about what am I doing that's preventing me from being a productive writer. And as you reach later stages in your academic career and these larger writing projects, making that progress is the difference between finishing the degree and not, right? And so how are you sitting out and saying, I'm spending X amount of time watching Netflix, right? I need to cut that down, right? Or I'm finding things that I can do that make me feel productive, but not, right? I talked about this in my time management session, but it used to be what I would do, which I described as my productivity time waster, is I'd go through and I'd organize my email inbox, right? I had other things that I needed to work on, but for some reason or another, I just couldn't get my head into it. And so instead I would go into my work email and I'd be deleting and sorting emails, right? I'm so productive. I'm getting to inbox 0 Have I done anything? No, not really, right? It made me feel productive, but didn't actually lead to productivity. So making a list of what I'm not going to do. And then that again calls out those negative behaviors. We started out the conversation by talking about what could you do to ensure your failure, right? How do you avoid that then? You've named it. It's part of that process of naming things that are preventing you from being successful. So try the 4 list strategy next time you're writing. It's a good way to start getting you in that organized space. And if you have questions about anything, as we go through, I didn't mention this at the beginning, if you have questions throughout the session, you would elaborate on something, I'm not covering it very clearly, put it in the chat, ask me in the room. I'm a very informal presenter in that way. You don't have to hold on to your questions till later. Ask me as we go through. Otherwise, I just keep rolling on. All right, step 2, you've got to organize. The next step is you have to set a timeline and goals. Okay? If you don't set a timeline and goals, you won't dedicate the time you need to your writing to really truly be effective at it. And you won't actually know when you're done. Right? And so you have to set a timeline and goals. Ask yourself these questions. When must the project be completed? Right? What's your absolute drop dead deadline? When would you prefer to have it be completed? Typically, that's a bit earlier, right? How do I get something off my plate and I feel more comfortable about when something's done, right? It's due on Friday. I'd really love to have it done by Monday or Tuesday. Then I can fiddle with it if I need to, or just move on to something else, right? Give yourself some breathing room. And then figure out what milestones make sense. A lot of the writing projects you're going to work on as graduate students are larger projects, and you need some milestones along the way, particularly when you're thinking about that dissertation or thesis. It's a very lengthy document, and so you can't think of it as just one Leviathan that you have to work on. What are the milestones you need to be hitting? And what are the timelines for that? What we see sometimes happen is our doctoral students will get all the way through their coursework, right? They'll get to that dissertation phase, and they'll be stuck at dissertation for years, right? Not making the progress they need. Life gets in the way, and that's understandable, right? But there's also some of that self-defeating that happens there. We allow our life to get in our way to not finish that project because we haven't set the milestones and the goals and the timelines internally. We just know we have a massive document that we have to turn in, and it's just too big. So we work on something else, right? For that, I recommend using SMART goals, but I'm going to focus in on 2 sections of that. If you haven't heard of SMART goals before, then you haven't been in a session with me because I talk about them all the time. But those are specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. It's an acronym for goal setting. And research shows that if you write a SMART goal, if you turn a goal into a SMART goal, you're much more likely to achieve it. For your writing goals, make them SMART, but really hyper-focus in on the first 2 sections. Make it specific and make it measurable every time you're sitting down to write. You need to be specific so that you know when you've met your goal. It needs to be measurable so you know how much or how long you need to write for, right? When we talk about creating a writing habit, I want you each time you write to set a goal. Make it specific, make it measurable, right? That can be a certain amount of pages you want to have written, a certain amount of time you want to be writing for, a certain element of your writing that you want to improve, right? But make it specific and make it measurable, right? And when you're doing something like maybe like you're editing, right? And it's hard to know when you've finished editing, set a time, right? I'm designating 30 minutes for editing today. I need to get some work done on my editing and designate and do your 30 minutes, right? So make them specific and measurable. That will help you go a long way towards developing this habit in your accountability. All right, step 3 is we need to write every day. And that's the hard one, right? Finding time every day to write. So there's a couple ways you can go about this. There's actually something called the 14-day writing challenge. And I'll give you some links to where you can actually get a structured version of this here a little bit later in the presentation. But if you can do this 14-day writing challenge, it will start to create a habit for you and it'll make it easier to go forward, right? And so I encourage you to start with that 14 consecutive days. I'm gonna write every single day. And your target writing time is 90 minutes. Dan Allen's research and what she's talked about will tell us that writing for over 90 minutes, binge writing is not always as productive. And so we want to avoid having that be all that we do. Fully disclosing that in the graduate school, we do a writing retreat where we put you in a room from 8:30 to 2:30 and say, write the whole time, right? But it's once a month. It's not every day, right? And it's not the only space we expect you to write. So in this, you want to target that 90-minute window. So you fight that fatigue. But you're committing to every single day I'm going to write. So if you can't fit in 90 minutes and it's less, that's okay. But your bottom, your threshold, your minimum is 15. Everybody can find 15 minutes. Everybody can find 15 minutes. It's the habit and the idea and the pushing ourselves to do it when we don't want to, right? And so make it a habit every day. 14 days straight, 90-minute target, 15-minute minimum, and track how that's going, right? It's good to know, and then you can look back and say, over the last 2 weeks, my target was 90 minutes a day. 4 out of the 7 days of a week for 2 weeks, I hit the 90-minute mark. About 3 days a week for 2 of those weeks, I was somewhere between 15 and 30 minutes. I had less time. Or it was a weekend, and I just didn't feel like writing, so I hopped on my computer for 15 minutes. I did a bit of writing, and then I moved on. Because I'm a person, and that's okay, right? But this helps you create that cycle and that habit. That leads to greater accountability. And again, creating that habit is what's important, right? The session is about writing accountability, right? How you can be more accountable to your writing, how you can make more progress on that. I'm going to tell you that creating the habit of writing is what's going to get you there, right? You can have an accountability buddy, right? Your friend that helps keep you on track. Maybe you write together or you go on the 14-day writing challenge together and kind of help each other on that. But it has to be an internal thing eventually that you get to. That's creating that habit. And there's some science behind how you create an effective habit. This isn't just about writing. This is just generally about how you make a habit, but it applies here, right? And to create an effective habit, there's kind of this 3-step process, right? This triangle. There needs to be some kind of trigger that tells you you need to engage in the behavior, right? In this case, it's writing, right? The trigger might be that, every day at 1 o'clock, I've set aside time for my writing. I built it into my schedule. When I get to 1 o'clock, I eat my lunch, I finish my lunch, I jump into writing. That's my trigger, right? But there's a lot of ways you can have a trigger for that. It could be your morning coffee, right? When I have my morning coffee, I log in, I start writing. You figure out what is the trigger for you that says this is when I'm gonna start writing. That moves you to the action. The action is the writing, right? And you engage it for a certain amount of time. And then here's the fun part and the tricky part. You have to reward yourself, right? If you want to build a habit, there has to be a positive loop. And that can be Starbucks coffee, having a cookie, or just being kind to yourself that you did it, right? And reflecting on, like, yes, that is 5 days straight. I did it. I got it done. I only did 15 minutes, but I made sure it was there, right? So find that way to have a trigger that moves you to an action, that gives you a reward, that moves you back to the trigger, right? Find these things to help you. You can also find different, apps and things like that that just help with general habits and accountability, right? It's not specific to writing, but what is sticking in my brain right now is my partner does Duolingo. And the Duolingo bird on her desktop or on her computer or her phone, right? The icon changes over time. If it gets too late in the evening, that bird gets real angry at her, right? And it's a trigger. She'll literally be sitting there. It's like, oh crap, we're about to go to bed, and that bird is very angry. Before we turn on the lights, she's on there doing her Duolingo to keep that streak going, right? It's a digital bird, and a strict thing, it sticks for her, right? That's a trigger, an action, and reward, all in a very good loop, right? So she has a really long streak going of doing this, right? It's funny because it's also influenced my 11-year-old son, right? He started 6th grade, so we got him a phone because he has to walk to school. He downloaded Duolingo. He's doing 3 different languages daily on Duolingo. He's doing German, he's doing Spanish, he's doing Hawaiian. Yeah, man, do it. Love it. Really worried about his streaks. He got in trouble when he got his phone taken away at night. And he was real mad because he hadn't done his Duolingo yet. Anyway, find these ways to build that in, right? So you can find apps like that that can help you kind of create these reward loops. And so look into some things like that if you like that style, right? Otherwise, find a way to give yourself this trigger, action, and reward. Some other tips to creating a habit that I think are really helpful, and some of these come from Jan Allen, some from other areas. The idea of writing hot and editing cold is really impactful for creating a good, positive writing habit and staying in your flow. When we say write hot, edit cold, what we mean is as you're in your flow, stop self-editing. Stop going back and changing sentences. Stop rereading paragraphs. Just go, right? When you're in that flow of ideas, work through all of it and then let it sit. Come back the next day during your half an hour of editing time and edit there. You'll have more clarity on your writing when you do that. So edit cold. You will also avoid the mistake, and this happens for folks when they write. They'll edit something 2 or 3 times and they'll leave little bits behind that kind of ruin the flow or make the sentence not make sense, right? And when you're typing it, it makes sense. You're blind to the error. You miss that you left a word out or left a word in that shouldn't have been there as you changed it, right? How many times you've done this? You went to send an email and you went and changed a line and then forgot to remove all of it, right? And so write hot, edit cold. Changes your mode of going. Eliminate distractions as much as you possibly reasonably can, right? I have 3 boys at home. I cannot eliminate them from all of what I do, but I can go to a quieter part of my house if I need to, right? Where you can eliminate distractions, then maybe not having the TV on while you're writing, right? Or it may be creating an environment where the distraction really isn't a distraction. I know some folks really like the YouTube videos, the Write With Me videos, if you've ever heard and seen these, right? Where it's literally, you turn it on and it's a 3-hour video of someone sitting at like a desk or somewhere in a coffee shop or something like that. And they're writing.
Yes.
They're doing their academic work. And it feels like you're not by yourself, right? Some folks might find that as distracting. Other folks might find that it's actually eliminating the distraction because there's something else happening there that keeps you in the moment, right? So eliminate the distractions and identify for you what they are. And again, use a timer. Yes.
I like to use sometimes the Pomodoro method
Yes.
with music that has a certain time of minutes and then gives you a break, a brief break,
Yeah.
and you going.
I love that. So make sure our folks online could hear that. One of our in-room folks said they like to use the Pomodoro method, but attached to music. And if you're not familiar with the Pomodoro method, it's where you do 15-minute, right?
Yes.
There are 15-minute increments where you basically set a timer. You work for 15 minutes, then you take a 5-minute break. That's gonna be 25 minutes and then 5-minute break. But basically around the idea of like you're timing yourself and then building in breaks. And I've not heard doing that with music though. That's really great. Like the music is built into what you do. If you want to know more about Pomodoros, I do include that in our time management session. It's on our website. You can check that out if you want to learn more about it, or just kind of Google it, find good information. But I love the idea of having that be accompanied by music as the timer. For some folks, like you need a quiet space. And for some folks, you need some noise in the background, or you'll go crazy, right? Know yourself and make that work. But that does lead to the last piece of making sure you do use a timer, right? So you know how long you're writing and you're meeting those goals. Yes, good.
How to deal with the fact that sometimes you just like laying prepare, you don't even know where to start. Just like your brain, but brain.
Yeah. So how do you deal with writer's block? So that's a good question. Let's hold that here because I've got some stuff that kind of talks about that, right? And if we don't get to it fully, we'll expand on it. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Good question. Actually, it's right here. So other selected tips that I found, and she's a lot of stuff on her website from the Productive Writer. But some other tips that will help you with the overall increasing your productivity is first, find your best energy when you write. For a lot of this, that's going to be earlier in the day. Not everyone, but a lot of us is early in the day. The challenge is we don't often sit down and start our day with writing, right? And so finding ways to do that is going to be productive, right? I know for myself, my tiredest time of the day is between 2 and 4 p.m., right? I should not sit down and try to do any heavy lifting between 2 and 4 p.m. It's not going to work for me as well as it can if I start early in the day, right? So find your best time, your best energy. And for you, if that's late in the evening, it's totally fine, but identify when it works for you. Don't stop writing when it's hard, and don't stop writing when it's easy, right? There's two different behaviors that we'll see, right? You may have writer's block and you're sitting there, you're like, I'm not making the progress I need. If you've set 90 minutes, you need to keep going. That is one of the ways that you break through on writer's block is you don't give up. But it's also a situation where we set a 30-minute timer, we get in a flow, everything's coming to us, and then the timer goes off, oh, I gotta go to the next thing. Don't. If you can, keep writing. You're in the groove, right? So don't give up on those moments when you know that you're hitting your flow, right? Build into that where you can. When you do stop, make that list of what comes next. We talked about that earlier, but it's a hugely important one, so I cover it twice. So you know what you're doing next. Don't wait for the inspiration, right? You have to work through to get to the inspiration. And when you have the writer's block, you're always waiting for something to strike you, and that's when I'll type it down. Those moments will be few and far between, right? If you have a writing habit where you're writing every single day, the inspiration will find you in those moments, right? And you just have to gut through. And so don't wait for the inspiration. If you have to sit there and stare at that page, just start writing, right? And it can be, you can open up a document, this isn't even about my research. I'm just gonna start typing and writing. Get some words out there, get flowing, my brain starts engaging in that way, and then I'll jump into my research, right? Develop outlines and chapter summaries for what you're doing, right? If you have these large projects you're working on, if you try to jump in to a blank page, it's gonna be really hard, right? And if you're at that blank page, if you outline, this is what I wanna be talking about, you'll start pulling yourself into the moment, right? The summaries are also really helpful as you kind of figure out what did I just write about, right? And if you were able to take your entire chapter and condense it into a paragraph or half a page for yourself, right? That'll be helpful for you to know in other chapters what might relate. So that summary is for you to help you connect the dots. Find a support group or a writing group to write with others. It can be really helpful. And that can be virtual, online, it can be in person. As I mentioned a couple times, we do have the writing retreats at the graduate school. First one's in October, second one's in November. That is a great place to start developing and forming that community. And then request feedback from your advisor and ask specific questions, right? If you want to be productive in your writing, get feedback about it. You can ask specific questions about it. If you feel like your writing is missing something, ask them about it. Is it a stylistic thing? Is it your transitions? Are you still translating and working through one language to another and like help me understand how I get my flow better, right? Ask specific questions about that from you and getting feedback from your advisor or the writing center on campus. That is going to help you feel more productive in what you do, more committed to your writing. The more successful you feel at doing this, the more likely you're to continue engaging with that and just getting better and better and better over time, right? It's a snowball effect. Check real quick. I love that. Quote here from the group, inspiration can find you anytime, but it has to find you working. Yeah, right? Love that, thank you. All right, so I'm gonna drop these in the chat so you have it, and I'll pass out, actually Elizabeth, pass these out here. I'll pass both of them out. Let me jump these in the chat. I have two handouts that I'm gonna give you that are just good kind of resources. And I'll talk about each one. Okay, so we're gonna get a copy real quick. All right, so I have these two handouts that I wanted to give you. These are examples of documents that we've used around writing accountability that I thought might be helpful to see examples of, right? Things that you can create for yourselves to help you along this journey, right? The first one I'll talk about is the Summer Writing Goals Handout, right? It's a very basic document that we did with students over we had a summer series. We're inviting students to come in, have like a summer virtual writing group, and basically they'd meet, talk for a couple of minutes online about how the writing was going, and then just dive into writing time together, right? And we gave them this document where they could articulate their weekly goals, monthly goals, long-range goals, do a little progress check with themselves. You remind them what SMART goals were, right? It's a really simple planning sheet. When you think about jumping into this, it's very easy for you to create something like this for yourself, right? Here's an example. Like if I wanted to go through, I'm a more visual person, right? Versus just a checklist. And maybe you're like, you got a long project you're working on, or maybe you want to form a writing group, right? This is a good way to very easy document to do that, right? The other one is a bit longer. We used to have a writing group request process in graduate or program. Essentially, that if we get enough people that were expressing interest in a writing group, we would pair them up and then give them documents and say, here, go and do that, right? Now, we found that the students engaged with it, liked it, but getting enough students to engage with it was a bit of a challenge, right? Us being the focal point wasn't super effective. What I found is more effective is encouraging folks to engage in writing groups and then giving them the material, right? As opposed to us creating an over-structured environment. This is essentially a charter that you can use to create a writing group. And we had a PhD student in writing and rhetoric actually develop this based off of research on the process of writing. So there's good stuff in here. But it's this where you can actually put in there like the name and contact information is involved. You can talk about what you're actually trying to do in the group, because depending on what your goals are, you have different groups. And so you could be talking about accountability, which is really just a support group to make sure we're all doing our writing. You can have a group that focuses on giving draft comments. So you meet together and then you pass around your drafts. One that's specific to editing, right? Or something that's just other, right? We're maybe doing a mishmash of things. Maybe it's a long-term group of friends you're going through and doing all of these things with. You can map out how long you're going to be holding this group for, how often you're going to meet, right? And then there are the descriptions of the actual writing groups there at the back half of this document. I want to give this to you as well. So if you're thinking about, man, I would like to form a writing group, this is a great way to do that. Meet other people in your program, right? Or maybe you attend the writing retreat and you're like, you know what, I made a couple of friends there. Or you see people in the chat right now and you're like, you know what, I'm interested in a writing group. Here's my email. Let's do this, right? There's ways to go about this. And I wanted to give you these documents and resources, these real world examples of how you can put this in practice. Right, so everybody's got that. A couple more resources I'm gonna show you. So the first one, first QR code there is the NCFDD website. Now, if you didn't know, that's the National Center for Faculty Diversity Development, and we have an institutional membership to that resource, which means you can log in and create a profile and access their content. Some of it is really targeted towards faculty and maybe a bit harder for you to really get to that level and use, right? Others are really directly applicable to you as graduate students. They have a 14-day writing challenge you can register for, which is a great way to kind of go through that we've taught. You can do that challenge on your own or in a structured environment. They also have what's called the Right Now course. I will tell you that is not free. It is a registration cost. It is not included with our institutional membership. But if you want, you can engage in it. It's a resource and an option. And they also have what are called their core curriculum sessions. And a lot of those focus on the process of writing and accountability toward writing and making progress there, right? And if you're interested in becoming a faculty, using these resources is awesome. So I encourage you to check this out. Check out what they have for your resources there. And again, there's things in the core curriculum that directly target this writing process section, right? A little more in depth than what I'm doing today. But also check out what else they have there. There's good resources there. I also linked to Jan Allen's website, as I said I would. So you have that information. There's a lot more on her website that you can dig into. You can also get a copy of her book if you're interested and dig into that. And there's a lot of good information there. You can learn more about her and why we use her a lot. And then we have our writing retreats. October 18th and November 15th will be our 2 dates for that we've confirmed for the fall. We may or may not add a December date. Typically, it gets a little bit. December is a very short month academically, right? We have about a week, and then we're into finals. And we don't typically do programs during finals. But we may do either a virtual one or host something else. But we have 2 confirmed. We will likely do 3 in the spring. Cool? Come check out those spaces. The one thing I love a lot of things about the writing retreat. One of my favorite things about the writing retreat is that each semester and each year, I will see similar faces show up to every writing retreat, and they build a community through that. And people are doing very drastically different things in that space. I've had folks working on a heavy science dissertation in that space, right along someone who is working on a book of poetry for publication, right next to each other. And that is a cool, powerful space to be in that is very energizing. I also feed you. There's breakfast and there's lunch, right? Who doesn't love that? So come in, check those out, tell your friends, meet some people, right? But know what you have as resources, right? Also check out our writing center on campus. A lot of times our students assume the writing center is not for them because they're graduate students. This is not the case. They have folks there that can help you with your writing. What they can't do is you can't drop off your dissertation and say, I'd like comments, please. Here's my dissertation. They won't do that. But you can drop off a section and say, I'm looking for these comments. Can I schedule a appointment to go through it, right? They won't do a full-scale review. If you want a full-scale review, that is something you can look for, and you can find services that'll do it for not a lot of money, right? It's not inconsequential, but there are professionals that do that work that they can look into that for you. So I encourage you to check some of those things out, find a consultant for that. But for the smaller sections, use our writing center on campus. Sound good? So, covered a good amount of material today in a pretty efficient amount of time. I do want to open it up to any questions that you might have, something we didn't cover as well as we could have, any thoughts y'all have. So I'll go to the chat, I'll go to the room, anything you got, I'm happy to answer it now. Yes?
Always I thought it's really important to read many books. You know, nowadays, people are used to read books. But I'm more familiar with the paper books.
Yeah.
I don't know. For my first language is not English. I'm not good in reading English book. Which kind of you think is better for you to, to be more friendly with the English book? Because for me, the English text is too long. It's difficult for me to read all.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get better, but
yeah, that's a good question. So make sure that our folks online could hear. The question is about the guidance that people often get up to be good at writing, that you should read a lot of books, right? And be consistently reading. And that also was combined with the two other points of that we tend to get a lot more virtual versus like physical media for our books, which can be a bit of a challenge. And also the language barrier, English not being your first language, and it makes reading a bit more laborious for you, right? What I would say with that is, yes, the more you read, the more you'll find that natural fit, and you'll get better at your writing, right? You'll start getting more fluid with it, right? And that can be things that you're reading that are not even related to your subject, right? I think it's good to get outside of your immediate subjects and just do some reading for fun, right? That can also be really hard as adults. I just finished a book that I bought 2 years ago, and it wasn't a long one that I finally finished on a plane. It took me forever to get through it. It wasn't a very good book, I'll be really honest with you. That makes it hard, right? But I try to carve out time to do that reading. I think for that, I would recommend make it a habit, right? And not a 90-minute habit. Make it a 15-minute habit. And find some things that you can, if going through and you find it laborious reading in English, pick up either a book you're familiar with in your language in English and reread it, right? Or pick up something that you're going to enjoy reading and then give yourself 15 minutes a day to be reading through it, right? And that'll pull you through. And you'll find over time, like any other skill, those skills will improve. And as you have more skill improvement, you'll be more confident, right? So that's my recommendation there. Is that helpful? Other questions?
Okay, go on.
I see just some, I will definitely get to see some here online real quick here. Will invites go out for the retreat? Absolutely. Those go out about 2 weeks in advance. So here in the next couple of days, expect an invite to the first writing retreat. Asking about posting the files again. Yes, I will do that really quickly. What happens if writer's block sets in? You have to keep going, right? That's the hard part. If you find yourself with writer's block, the only way to get through it is to go through it, right? And so you're sitting there, just start writing. And for some of that, you may write about something else, right? I'm really struggling at this topic. Maybe I need to switch to a different subject area in my thesis, or write about something else, right? And get your ideas, your brain moving, and then come back to it. We also, I think, going back to the concept of perfection in our writing, that is sometimes what creates the writer's block. We're staring at a page and we don't know how to start that paragraph, right? I actually was trained to be an English teacher way back when, and when I would talk to my students about that, I would always encourage them to use what's called stock sentences, right? And a stock sentence is a sentence that you put in at the start or the end of a paragraph that you know you're going to remove later, that stylistically, it's not a very good sentence, but it gets you moving, right? Literally putting a sentence of, in this sentence or in this paragraph, I'm going to talk about blank, and then you go, right? You come back later, you delete that sentence that basically got you started, and you put in what is the actual engaging hook in your starting sentence, right? Some of those things will get you past that writer's block, right? And know that you're going to have sessions that are going to be more productive than others, and that is okay too. The writer's block will get a bit easier. Copy of the presentation. I am recording the session. As long as the recording is good, I will post it to our website later, about a week after the session is typically when I do that. So yes, okay. And then you had a question here.
Kind of related to hers.
Sure.
Like since my first language is French, then I had the same issues when I came here a couple of years ago. I was like, we receive like ideas like you need to write in English, you need to read in English first, then you're going to be used to it. But having so many courses as another student, having so many books, there are so many articles, it was just not easy at all. And now in PhD level, it's even worse. So I decided like I'm going to write in French, then translate in English, maybe you will translate in software so that I can just keep up. Because if I end the semester, I fail my grade because I was just trying to be fluent in English writing, I'm not going to be really smart, you know. So I don't know like what would be good to do, or I should just focus even if I'm writing with so many errors like typos, or I just have to submit it anyway. Then this is the way to go, or just what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. And to make sure that our people online can hear us, the question is about if English is not our primary language, and for you, it's French is your primary language, your first language, and you're finding it really hard to make progress like on large writing, it's slowing you down to the point where you're not meeting your marks. Is it okay to write in your first language and then work on translating, right? So I'm going to say yes, but. If you are studying in the United States, part of the reason you're here is developing some of those language skills, right? And being able to communicate across languages. And I'll tell you all, as folks that have multiple languages that you speak, and I don't fluently speak multiple languages, I've tried. I've never been really good at it. I did not start studying languages prior to the critical age. If you know anything about critical age theory, you need to start young. Otherwise, it's much harder, right? And so I marvel at our students that do 2 and 3 and 4 languages, right? That's an amazing skill. You want to keep refining and working on it, right? Don't give that up. Don't give it up when it's hard, right? But you have to recognize when you need to push yourself and when you need to find your flow, right? And so what I might recommend there is as you're working on, large writing projects, if you're much more productive writing in your first language and then going through the process of translating it, do that. But then make your other writing in English, right? Every email communication, it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna give up on writing in English. I will translate everything over after the fact. No, write every email and stuff like that in English and work on there, because that is a lower stakes environment. It's small snippets of communication, right? And I will see students do this the other way, where they know they're working on picking up a second language, and they will write their smaller bits of communication and other things they're writing in the other language, right? Because it gets them in that mindset. It's a low stakes versus a large thing, right? And if you are going to write in your first language and then translate to English, do not just trust translation software or something like that, right? Or know that things will not be a one-to-one transfer, right? The idea you're conveying in one language may need some tweaking and adjustment to logically be represented in the other. And so take the time to invest in that. And that's where it's also really important to have someone review your writing and talk about that and be open about that. Like if that's you take it to the writing center or you have a peer reviewing it, let them know, like, I wrote this in French and I translated it to English. And then I read through it and tried to fix the tonal errors or maybe the grammatical ones that kind of popped up from the translation. But I know there's more here. Can you help me with this, right? That'll be much more productive, right? That's my recommendation. It's a good one. That was a good question. It's a fair recommendation. A good question. Other questions? Let's see, the files are posted again, so we're good with that. Any other questions?
Can we discuss a little bit more about the scheme that you had in um, one of the images? It was research and then question mark and then writing.
Yeah.
Because it connects with what she was saying about reading and you're researching, but at the same time that you're researching, you're reading. For me, sometimes works to have notes. I do notes aside of in my notebook, or I also prefer to read paper books. It's easier for me. And then, but what about the question mark? And well, when I do notes, when I write notes, it's easier for me to go to writing, because I just take my notes and put it in the Word document or everything, and it goes and I put it in a structure and everything. So it helped me because I feel like I advance, I go on the work, writing and in the writing. But please tell us a little bit more about the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you asking that. So questions about elaborating on the diagram here of research question mark writing, right? That visual representation. And you chatted also, again, hopefully they heard you, but I always like to repeat. You talked about in your process as you're doing your research and reading, you like to take a lot of notes that help organize you later that you pull into your writing, right? This is a very simple representation of essentially the idea that this question mark here, this is everything you're doing to organize yourself along the way to get to the space of writing, right? Because a lot of times folks will see it as the research and then the writing is the very next step. It's the acknowledgement that there's another intermediary step you need to take to write effectively. And if that is taking notes along the page and in the margins, right? And then organizing those, if that is outlining, if it is the for list strategy, if it is taking the time to organize all your digital files, right? Maybe they're really messy and you need to hit that point where like now it's kind of reached a critical mass, I gotta organize it, right? Or maybe you haven't done it yet, or you're figuring out the scheme for yourself. It's all those things that you do to create the organizational scheme that when you sit down to write, you can truly commit to writing, right? You're not committing to writing and organizing your files and taking notes and outlining, right? You're just writing. And so it's giving full weight to that organizational step. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Yeah, good question. Check here. How recommend writing if you have a learning disorder, i.e. Dyslexia and things like that? That's a good question. That's a tough one. I will self-disclose for my own self. I am dyslexic and I do have ADHD. And so for me, I can tell you one of my biggest fears is having to write anything on a whiteboard in a session. My spelling is terrible. It's atrocious. I can't spell atrocious, but I can use it in a sentence. It has always been hard for me, right? I trained to be an English teacher, and I found out very quickly that it was hard for me to be in the classroom and teach English because I felt like I was really going to embarrass myself in front of these high school students. That's hard. Part of it is the acknowledgement there and utilizing your tools, right? I typically will not handwrite a lot of things that I use. A lot of times I will type stuff, or I will note it and I will call it out, right? That inability to spell I call the whiteboard effect, because it's even worse when I'm in front of folks, and I will call out like, I'm going to definitely spell this wrong. That helps alleviate that concern and alleviate the tension, right? That's about presentation. But if you're working through writing, you may have very specific, so if you don't have an experience dyslexia and things like that, you're not familiar, it affects people in different ways, right? My brother also has some learning disabilities affected to his writing. Very intelligent guy. You don't want to debate him. He will destroy you in a debate, right? But if you see him write, it's a challenge. His brain just will automatically drop like articles out of the sentence, and he won't even know it until he's read it, right? And so you have those kinds of challenges. That's where I encourage you to lean on the resources around you to help you with the editing process, right? And don't be ashamed of that, and be open about that, right? Struggling a bit with writing is not a direct reflection on raw intelligence, right? And too often we equate it that way. I know a lot of stupid people that are eloquent writers. I know a lot of really intelligent people that struggle to write, okay? So it's okay. Use your resources, right? For other things, I have ADHD. And so for me, when I'm doing kind of an involved project, I like to have something else to move my attention, right? For folks with ADHD, having more stimulus actually creates a focus. I was talking to heard some research on this, that is the reason why people with ADHD tend to speed when they drive. They're actually better drivers at high speed than they are at slow speed, because their brain is visually processing things, which creates a focus. So I will do other things to have kind of something else that pulls my attention forward, right? I just got a new pen from the Office of International Programs. It's my new favorite thing. It's got a globe on top that spins. And if I will be sitting there thinking, working on something, and I'll be spinning that with my thumb, right? That helps me focus. But you have to find out what works for you, right? I have ADHD. My brother has ADD. If he had that pen, he wouldn't get anything done, right? And so he has to find things that are specific for him. And so to this question, what I encourage you to do is seek out some resources, the Writing Center, talk to faculty members. You can even go to the Center for Accommodation and Support Services on campus, CAS, and they may be able to give you some very specific resources that I can't, that can help you with this. But don't suffer on, right? And don't be down on yourself for those things, right? Those are human things. And you will find as you open it or talk about it, there's a whole bunch of really intelligent people around you experiencing similar things, right? Or their own set of challenges. That's my best recommendation that I can give on that. Other questions? Well, I appreciate you all. I've had a good amount of time. I have some questions come up in the chat. Thank you, chat, for being very engaged. Elizabeth, have we gotten attendance from them?
Yes.
Excellent. So we got attendance from them, got attendance from you all. I appreciate you all. As I mentioned, this is a new session. When you get the feedback thing, if you could fill that out for me, it'd be really great. Tell me about what we're doing good and not good here. I'll make sure I fix it. But thank you for your time today. And go out, go forth, and write. Have a good day.